This is my BMW. It needs a new steering rack, and normally those run for about $160, so why did I pay $600 for a rebuilt steering rack? Brain damage, probably. For those of you not familiar, this is my 2003 BMW 330i ZHP. The ZHP is sort of the sport performance package. These days they call them like M Sport or M Performance packages or whatever. It's a sport package on top of the 330i that added a few things. Special wheels, special bumpers, special shocks, springs, differential, transmission, camshafts, tune, interior trim, probably some other stuff I'm not remembering, and the steering rack. I'm doing the thing where I'm all in shadow again, just to annoy that one guy in the comments that always comments on it. The steering rack in the ZHP is essentially a Z4 rack. It has the same amount of turns lock to lock, but apparently there are some internal valving differences that are fairly subtle, but it is one of the biggest differences that sets this aside from the way that a normal 330 drives. That and probably the differential and 6-speed transmission. Those are just like the big ticket items that really make this package special, so I really wanted to have that special steering rack. But the problem with a special rack is special availability. What, you think you can just go buy these things? No. You gotta have them rebuilt, and you gotta have them rebuilt by the rack doctor, because that is the only place that anyone seems to know of that actually differentiates between the ZHP rack and the normal rack. And for him to rebuild one, he had to have one first, so it was about a month and a half wait for him to actually find a core that he could rebuild and send my way. And for the princely sum of $600, I now have a perfectly rebuilt ZHP steering rack. But Jake, I hear you thinking through your computer screen. Why do you think your rack needs rebuilt? Well, that's a good question, one guy in the comments. This car has a bit of play in the steering wheel. Now, the first thing I did to fix that play was replace the rag joint in the steering shaft. I repeat, I replaced the rag joint in the steering shaft. And for that other guy in the comments section, I replaced the rag joint in the steering shaft, because it seems like every time I bring this up, people don't hear that and they immediately go into the comments and say, oh, you need to replace the steering coupler. It's the steering. I replaced the steering coupler and it fixed my car right up. I replaced it. It was the first thing I tried. It did help. My old steering coupler was shot. If you have a BMW with steering plate, go replace the steering coupler. It takes 2 tools, 5 minutes, and away you go. I also replaced the lower control arms. The ball joints were getting a little warm and letting a little bit of play happen. I replaced the inner and outer tie rods, some other stuff that I don't remember, but we're at the point now where if I put the car up on a 4-post lift, which I don't own, so I can't show you, I can very clearly put my hand on the tie rod, my other hand on the input shaft, and move one without the other one moving. And this is only on centered. That is the other tell that the steering rack is worn. There's only play when the steering wheel is straight. And the reason that is because of the way that a rack and pinion works. You've got the rack, which is like just a bunch of teeth in a line, and then you've got the pinion, which is a normal ass looking gear that meshes with it, and that's what turns. And what happens is your car spends 90% of the time more or less driving straight down the road. So the part of the rack that the pinion engages with when you're going straight wears out first, and then you get just a little bit of slop in it, but only there. If you turn the wheel 90 degrees, it doesn't have play anymore. And so that's really the best way that I know of to tell when it's actually your rack and pinion that's gone bad, which mine has. Therefore, my bank account is $600 lighter. Please click on the ads. I need it. But that's enough talking. Time to get started. And in the infamous words of some upside-down super obsessives, step 1, jack up your car. Though before we do that, it's probably worth seeing what I actually bought here. And this is a little bit of cheeky clickbait because I am getting a core charge back from my $600. So I do kind of want to not thoroughly destroy this box. So I'll probably open it off camera so I can be a little bit more careful. Hey, wow, look, it is a steering rack, and that is in absolutely gorgeous condition. That is a yellow tag rack, which is the other term for these. It came with new inner tie rods and boots, which I won't be using because mine has brand new inner tie rods and boots, and I don't want to separate the inners and outers, so I'm probably going to cut these and take these inners off, do the same for the rack in there, and then just swap out the rack itself. That way my alignment will stay the same. What won't stay the same is my steering wheel relative to the rack. So I'm probably also going to have to like measure if the rack is on center or not. I'm not sure. It comes with some new crush washers. Comes with new crush washers. We're going to need to cut these off, take off these inner tie rods, see if we can find our center point here to hope that the steering wheel is... Because the thing is, I want the steering wheel to be straight when I put this on, and I want this to be centered. Now, I'm going to have to get some sort of an alignment afterwards, but what I don't want is for there to be more turns... blah, 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 blah. Words are difficult. What I don't want there to be is like 2 turns to the lock from the right from center, and then 1.5 turns to the left, because I installed the rack wrong and we just took up all the slack with the, tie rod adjustments. I don't want that. So I need to try and get this as close to center as possible before I put it in the car. Not gonna lie, it kind of feels like I'm disrespecting some part of this guy's work by just immediately coming in here and cutting these clamps off, but hopefully this way my toe will still be correct after I do this. Come on now. While those clamps are cut off, I'm going to leave these baffles on here, though, and leave the tie rods on until the second I'm ready to put this in the car and put my tie rods and baffles on there, because I don't want to contaminate the seals on the end of the steering rack. So let's turn our attention to the car itself. I am now in possession of gloves, which is great, because you can't see my whack-ass finger now. It exploded yesterday. It was a really fun time. One nice thing about this particular job is that I'm not replacing my rack due to leaks, so I'm fairly certain that my system is relatively clean. The previous owner did say he replaced the power steering pump and stuff fairly recently, so hopefully that means there's not a bunch of trash in the lines that I'll have to contend with. Well, I know there's not a bunch of trash in the lines. The fluid actually looks super clean, so that's nice. Let's see here. Step 1 is gonna be removing this plate for better access. I'm going to want to be able to get to the steering coupler up in there, and I kind of want to do all this from the bottom instead of messing with removing the airbox. You can get to the coupler from the top, but when I replaced the coupler, I did it from the bottom, and it was super easy, so we're gonna do that again. Yay, a 16. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 16 millimeter bolts. Takes off this bottom plate, which ties the suspension together and all sorts of other fun stuff. And I'm just gonna cut the recording because it seems like a waste of time. The fun part of this is all of my power tools are elsewhere for another project that you guys haven't seen yet. So we're doing this hand tool style. So now that we got that down, the steering coupler is right there, but more importantly, it's lunchtime. Come with me on an adventure, children, and we'll see if any of this makes sense. So, looks like here is one of the mounting bolts, and here's another one of the mounting bolts. Here's a 10 mil right there for the bracket for the pressure lines going to it. We'll want to take that off so that those are able to be moved out of the way. The actual fittings are here, and they are big honkin' freaking, there they are. Very difficult to see with the boot in the way. Those are some huge fasteners on those pressure lines, and then there is the rag joint. So I am just going to, let's see, some are saying to loosen the top one, I guess. So I'll just loosen that top bolt, and then I'll go make sure the steering wheel is centered before actually, so that the steering column is collapsible. So I can just push the steering column up, and it'll release up out of that rag joint, and then the entire rack is ready to come down. So I think the first step here, let's see, order of operations. It's going to be real hard to get to them, but I think those pressure lines need to happen first. Problem is, I don't think I have any sockets that big, so I'm gonna have to figure out how on earth to make that happen. I got the steering joint disconnected, and I think I'm gonna change the order of operations here. I think we're going to undo the inner tie rods and then drop this down so we can actually get to those hydraulic fittings on the top, because you can't get to them. Who needs a lift? I need a lift. Lefty loosey. Should be like this. Come on. Hey, Now the rack itself can come down. This is what I like to see. It's just a bolt and a nut, and it just holds the rack directly to the subframe. No bushings. Here's my mini rant for the day. Steering rack bushings are dumb and should not exist. Racks should just be bolted directly to the subframe. All that a bushing does is make you less connected to the tires and take away feedback from you. Feedback that you might need depending on the road conditions or weather conditions or traction conditions or what have you. And then it's just another thing to go bad. And then when the bushing goes bad, you lose even more control over your car. It's a stupid concept to me, honestly. And also, to take care of another thing in the comments preemptively, yes, I know my front tires are completely worn out. They were on the rear when I had those worn out R-tab bushings. But yeah, I just haven't got around to replacing them yet. Whatever, it doesn't rain here much anyways. Okay, so now this one. I'm not quite sure how I'm gonna snake my wrench up there. Never mind, it's actually the easiest thing in the world. I forgot to hit record. Oh well. Alright, so now... Man, that smells terrible. There we go. So this is the neat part, and also the part that I don't really fully understand. I took the other bolt out of the rag joint here, so we can take this off. Yeah, there we go. It just comes off that easy. And you've got this dust shield here, which, as you can see, has a slot that only allows this to go on one way. And of course, it only goes on to the steering shaft one way. Stay. Stay! Oh my goodness. There we go. Yeah, once you take this dust shield off, there's a way that you put it on the new one, which I'll let you know when I figure out what that is, that makes sure that this is all aligned properly. Ooh, fun squelching noises. And it makes sure that things are aligned properly so that the steering wheel is straight on the new car. So I think this just pulls off of here. Definitely gonna need both hands for that. And then we transfer it over to the new one. Yeah, so that was pretty stuck. Ended up using my vice grips with a slide hammer and then just kind of grabbing it here and pulling it off. And ew. So I just threw some more ATF in there to flush out the lines. So right now what I'm going to try and do is center up this steering rack. So I've got it all the way turned to one side, and now we're going to go back to the other side. So that's half a turn, one turn, 1.5 turns, 2 turns. I believe this is a 2.5 turn rack. That's 2.5. 3 turns. Okay, it's a 3-turn rack. So 1.5 turns back will be center. Okay, there we go. I need both hands for that. So now I've got it to 1.5 turns. Pointer's over here. Started over here. Went 1.5. So now I'm going to take this back off and flip it around so that this pointer goes right on this parallel, this edge here that's sticking out at 90 degrees. Not this edge, but it wants to point right at this edge, and that should make sure that the steering wheel is as close to straight as you can get. And since I did the inner tie rods instead of parting the inners and outers, my toe should be correct. So if all goes according to plan, the car shouldn't need an alignment after this. Of course it will, because like I said, I had a bad rack to start with instead of just a leaky one. Good. I forgot to mention I did put some grease on the inside of that because this is a dust cover and it's supposed to prevent the ingress of garbage into this tower here. So now it's time to throw it in the car, really. For whatever reason, this rack's inner tie rods are way, way bigger than my old one, so I had to go buy a new wrench, and somehow Harbor Freight was completely out of everything, so really want this tie rod out of the way as well so that I can tighten down the banjo fittings for the hydraulic lines. I got them finger tight-ish, sort of. I just kind of stuck them up there blind, which was a debacle. This is very unfortunate. My half-inch drive ratchet is elsewhere, so here we go. That should be a solid seal. So let's get our old tie rod in and okay, the hydraulic lines are tight. Both tie rods are on. Wheels should be, towed in and out properly respected to each other, since we did not change the length of the tie rods. Assuming the length of the steering rack itself is the same. So now I'm just going to put the upper bolt for the rag joint back together, if I could see what I'm doing. So once I get this done, it's just a matter of clamping these steering rack boots and then filling it up with fluid and putting that big ol' brace back on. Cool. Okay, so for the boots themselves, to hold them on, I don't have these crimp-on clamps. What I do have is just some metal zip ties and a special tool. So I get to learn how to use a special tool today. So I'm going to do one side and try and figure it out, and then I'll get back to you once I actually know what I'm doing. Well, I have no idea if this is the absolute most correct way to do this or not, but let's see here. We go around. Just kind of cinch this up by hand. First, I'll put this stupid thing back so it's not dangling in my way. You get that fairly tight. And let's see, I think it wants us to go. I'm doing this based on like the picture of it in use on the packaging. Somewhat counterintuitively, I think it wants you to go this way. So, my hand is in the way. But it just does that. And it seems to just be cinching it down. Yep, it's drawing it in. And then I can just pull the tool out. And I just need to snip off the excess, and that's as tight as anything I've ever felt. Sweet. There we go. Alright, so that's all done under here. All that's left is to put the under tray back on, but before we do that, I want to just be sure that I can see any leaks. So I went ahead and put some amount of ATF in here. BMW recommends ATF, synthetic ATF, as power steering fluid. So let's go ahead and fire it up and see if we have any leaks. And bleed the air out and get it filled up, etc., etc. That should have ingested not quite all the fluid. And I see no leaks. So I'm just going to keep filling that up and turning the wheels. And then we'll put the car back together, or put the under tray back on, and we'll go for a drive. I'm excited. I'm very excited. It's on the ground now. Let's see what we're dealing with. Oh, that's how a BMW should feel. Oh my gosh. Okay, let's drive this thing. Oh my gosh. So steering wheel's off just a little bit, which is fine. Due to the way that I did that, I at least know that I'm not destroying my tires and my toe is correct. Now let's just see. Oh, that feels so much nicer. Going into and out of turns isn't as uncertain as it used to be. It is just like a scalpel, this car now. Oh, it's it's a whole new car now. This is a brand new car. Great success. I mean, it only took like, what's it been, 4 hours or so? And that includes, you know, brakes for my finger and having to go get all kinds of new tools. What is this guy doing? He doesn't know what he's doing. Okay. Well, this has been fantastic. Thanks for watching.